Welcome to the Paddle and Portage podcast. Little different sound to start the episode today.
Well, we're so familiar with the sounds of Ian Tamblyn strumming a guitar, LB, to start out most of the episodes of the Paddle and Portage podcast. But we are going to be hearing a fair amount of classical music in the episode today, which has a direct tie to paddling and the boundary waters.
Well, completely due to the fact that this winter a PNP subscriber named Hugh told us about this symphony and Sarah, who is the brainchild of today's episode.
That's right. Major shout out to Hugh for connecting with us and telling us about a Minnesotan, a music teacher named Sarah Kremer, who is indeed the centerpiece of the episode today. But before we get into Sarah's story, we should really acknowledge, LB, that music is a big part of this podcast. I mentioned Ian Tamblyn and, of course, the song Campfire Light, which has been with us since our beginning of doing Boundary Waters podcasts up here, which goes back almost a decade now, and the last 3 seasons with Paddle and Portage. So Ian Tamblyn, of course, most people who listen to this podcast are going to be familiar with Campfire Light and Becky's Canoe and these other songs that you hear throughout many of the episodes, but also people like Barbara Jean and our friend Aubrey, of course, from the Upstream Drifters, and also just our own musical interests in life and paddling, LB.
For many of us, the music we listen to composes the soundtrack of our lives. What brings that extra component of meaning making, of emotion into our day-to-day activities. And the Boundary Waters for us is no exception. There's a soundtrack to that place and to the people that we're connected to around that place that you just mentioned. And for us at least, it takes it to the next level.
It does, and so much of this podcast, and therefore as an extension, the Boundary Waters sound, is that acoustic guitar, folk strumming sound that we have on these episodes.
Maybe some banjo, maybe some fiddle. Folk music is so rootsy in its association with the outdoors that I'm most excited for today's episode, because this, you could say, is genre bending for the stereotypes of our beloved place.
That's right. It's next level connection to music and paddling, and instead of the guitar or Ian Tamblyn or Barbara Jean or Aubrey, we're going to have orchestras, and we're going to be talking about symphonies. And after a brief word from our sponsors, we are going to hear the story of Sarah Kremer
and her story about music.
Support for this episode of the podcast comes from Borderland Lodge, inviting listeners to unwind, explore, and create lasting memories against the backdrop of the Boundary Waters. They're offering pet-friendly cabins, lakeside lodge rooms, and cozy weekend dining along the shores of Gunflint Lake. You can find more about Borderland at their website, borderlandlodge.com. Also, check out their Instagram page for some of the incredible Italian pasta meals that Steph is making up at Borderland 2026. We're excited to see what happens up at Borderland Lodge, busy place all year round. Borderland Lodge on Instagram and Facebook, or their website, borderlandlodge.com. And this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Tuscarora Lodge and Canoe Outfitters, located on Round Lake. Tuscarora is a full-service Boundary Waters outfitter, serving Gunflint Trail entry points. They're now booking 2026 canoe trips and cabins. Check them out online at tuscaroracanoe.com or on their Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook pages at Tuscarora Canoe. Be sure to check out all their adventures on their social media pages as well. Sarah Kremer says music isn't separate from paddling. It's part of it.
Especially when you're sterning and just the push and pull of where you're going. There's so much art related to paddling. It's not just music, there's art involved as well. It's beautiful.
Sarah is 31 years old. She grew up on her family farm near St. Cloud, Minnesota. She took her first canoe trip when she was a teenager. It was epic by all standards. More expedition than anything else.
My first experience with the canoe trip was a 30-day experience, which was 2011. That was my first experience. We did the Blood Vein, and we actually finished on Lake McCusker. That was a whole thing. That year there were forest fires, and throughout that trip we had like satellite messages that we were going to be evac'd towards the end of our trip because the forest fire was on like the end of Lake McCusker. It was wild, and it was an amazing first experience. We ended up being able to finish our trip, and I remember we were at our pickup point on Lake McCusker, and we were camped, and we could see the forest fire on the other side of the lake, and we were picked up by a bush plane the next day. And then I loved those experiences. It was such a tight-knit, wonderful crew. We were a crew of 9, and I had 2 guides, and just phenomenal guides, phenomenal people. And I just caught the bug. I just knew there was something that I loved. It was just that formational personal growth, experiencing some hardcore portages for the first time and being pushed to your absolute breaking point. It was the first time I've been pushed that hard in my entire life.
That first trip was through the Minnesota-based Voyagers program. Her second trip was as well. And it too was beyond the normal, hey, let's go to the BWCA for the weekend type of an experience.
I loved it so much I wanted to go on a second trip. So then my senior year, I applied to go on the Far North trip. The Voyager offers a second year experience for those that would like to go. But this time you go a lot farther north. We ended up starting Norway House, which is just at the top of Lake Winnipeg. And then it just starts at the mouth of the Nelson River, and we paddled the middle track route to York Factory, Hudson Bay. So we followed that historical fur trade route all the way to Hudson Bay, and that was a crew of 6.
These early paddle trips were formative for Sarah's love of paddling. They also helped her carve out spaces for music, something she's been drawn to since she was a child.
Music has been foundation in my family growing up, starting with my parents. They instilled so much love and music in our family. And when I was just a little twerp, I guess the story was they brought me to church, and I was like, I don't know, I was probably 2 years old, and they handed me some claves and just to keep me busy, but they actually found that I was beating along with the song that was happening at the time, so they just left the claves in my hands, and I was just beating along with claves.
That love of music has turned into a career for Sarah, who is currently a music teacher here in Minnesota. A very, very busy music teacher, it turns out.
I am currently a 4th and 5th grade band teacher for 4 schools in the greater St. Cloud area, and then I also teach high school orchestra, middle school and high school orchestra at Cathedral High School. So I do 6th through 12th grade orchestra. So I'm busy. I have 5 schools that I teach music at, and so I basically go to 1, sometimes 2 schools in a day. And I teach lessons. I have individual lessons. I teach numerous amount of instruments. So I will be with my kids one-on-one playing clarinet, flute, saxophone, baritone. So I'm playing baritone euphonium with kids. Percussion lessons. I am one-on-one with violin, cello, double bass. I am giving lessons, and then I also have large group rehearsals with each of these schools, each of these students. A large part of my life is pouring into our kids, pouring music and allowing them opportunity to grow their skills and experience the full joy of music. So I'm sharing that with our kids.
On top of her work working in the school system as a music teacher, Sarah's also been busy writing music. And that's where we first heard about her work, as a listener of the Paddle and Portage podcast told us about Sarah's creativity, passion for music, and her love of paddling. What happened is, and why this person told us about Sarah, is because she wrote a symphony, and it's about paddling. This symphony, appropriately titled A Paddler's Symphony, will be performed for the first time in front of a live audience March 1st in the small town of Buffalo, Minnesota, which is about an hour northwest of Minneapolis. Sarah says she wrote it because, well, let's hear it from her.
It's a whole story. This whole symphony, it includes a lot of personal growth and personal experiences through these canoe trips. It's really interesting. I've heard from those that I've trusted to listen and get feedback from it. I've heard people telling me it's like Copeland-esque in some of the writing. So it's very grounded in nature, and it sounds like a Northwood symphony from the feedback that I've gotten. So now we're in the rehearsal stage bringing this to life, and I'm all here for it because I've never written a symphony before. So I am excited to help this grow.
Doug Wood is a Minnesota-based author and musician. Some of Doug's writings inspired Sarah's symphony, and his work was a familiar part of her paddling adventures.
And we would bring his books, we would bring them on trail and read them when we were actually in our wilderness places. And I always would bring Paddle Whispers on trail guiding. And I do remember what Doug told me, because I met with him earlier I don't even know if it was a year ago or whenever we met, because I wanted to meet with Doug to make sure permissions, because I have some of the word usage that is his in the symphony, and then also just to have him a part of this project was so meaningful.
A Paddler's Symphony has 4 movements, and here Sarah describes them.
To sketch the framework, I wanted it to be 4 movements, and I wanted the first movement, a cool night, to kind of be that night bog scenario that Doug describes. So I kind of would weave just that framework from Paddle Whispers, and also included some of my own influences from my personal experiences on trail throughout this entire symphony. So the first movement's a cool night, and it includes a frog chorus. And I actually I was sitting in a bog near our family farm just trying to listen to the frogs, and I actually had a really crappy off-road violin that I would be comfortable just trashing if it broke. And I was trying to capture frog sounds and trying to figure out how to get the orchestra to have this frog chorus sound. And then the second movement is the backcast. Doug Wood has a writing in Paddle Whispers about why go through the complete misery moments you can go through on canoe trips and just the personal self-growth. I don't want to take anything from what he wrote. Please check out Paddle Whispers. It's just those notions, and I have a lot of my far north trip, that Hudson Bay trip imagery within that second movement. It's pretty cool. The third movement is entirely my own. It's Lake of the Woods. It's called Lake of the Woods, and it's just capturing the vastness of the lake. Lake of the Woods is known for 14,000 islands on this lake alone, and many different channels for exploring in inland lakes. And so just the colors of all the sunsets and just the water horizons are all captured in that movement. And then the fourth movement is a fiery fiddle tune. It's called Let the Moose Run. And it's inspired by the the paragraph. So there's little paragraphs and nudges from Doug's writing where it's basically like doing something like with your life. There's no point. It's basically, what do you do with each day? So sleep is death, the sunrise is birth, and so you might as well let the moose run.
Writing a symphony about paddling didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't easy, Sarah admits. There were days when the inspiration wasn't there. And when those days arrived, she thought of it like she did on some of those harder days she's experienced on trail during the many canoe trips she's taken across North America.
Writing this symphony, it's been seriously a portage. I've been documenting my own videos along the way, and I have one, and I'm literally just laying on the floor of my apartment because I was stuck. You get stuck with the writing process, just like you went on a portage trail. Like, your canoe, like, popped off, there's a whole fork in the road, there's one end leading to the biggest wall of trees, the other, that you've ever seen, and the other fork leads to another huge wall of trees. What do? And the canoe's popped off. I'm sprawled out, not knowing what to do because I have this issue in my notation software. I do not know how to fix this or move forward. And that's happened so many times. And what do? You just pop up the canoe and you just keep going. You got to figure it out. And sometimes it's that age-old question, how do you get from point A to point B? You do it. And you'll figure it out. It's just been amazing, the parallels for that mental, how you approach a portage, like how to approach writing a symphony. It's like this one and the same.
Sarah's story illustrates the connection between music and outdoor adventures that many people can probably relate to. Though for her, it's the lack of separation between the two that's the key. In fact, for her, there's no separation at all between paddling, music, and the basic act of living. For her, it's all part of being alive. Paddling and making music and teaching music, sharing that inspiration, they're not hobbies or things that occupy time. Music and paddling, for Sarah, it's just a way of life.
It's a big part of my life. Yeah, and it's interesting how being away on those extensive trips, and I didn't have my saxophone. Like, I'm thinking of those initial 2 trips through the Voyager program when you're gone for like 35 days and you don't have instruments. We bring like harmonicas sometimes or we would sing, but I still found so much music in where we were, the musicality of nature. I didn't feel fully deprived. There were times where I did, and I would be making like videos, scat singing, or like doing like other things we would be singing. I felt lonely for my instruments, but being able to really be in tune to the musicality of nature and where we were and what we were doing. It's beautiful. It's artistic. So all of those connections and the imagery, just the connection between boat and hands.
Sarah says by getting those early epic trips that brought her to Woodland Caribou and then up to Hudson Bay, those were just the beginning of her love for paddling. She's been taken to the waters in the BWCA more often in recent years, staying busy writing music and keeping the trips shorter than those longer ones that got her on the water back when she was a teenager, growing up on the family farm. There's a lot of ways to find inspiration on a canoe trip, Sarah says, and it doesn't matter how far one travels in order to stir that sense of connection to the land and water. It's the ability to hear the music, she says. It keeps her moving forward.
You don't have to have been on like a 30-day trip or a 35-day, you don't need to have been on this like huge extensive trip to understand this piece. If you enjoy taking walks outside every day, if you enjoy breathing in the air, if you found wonder in so many magical things, if you have ever picked up a pine cone and held it in your hand and just felt that piece of the earth being connected to something, like there's all of that within this symphony. So it's very exciting.
A Paddler's Symphony will be performed for the first time ever in front of a live audience on Sunday, March 1st at 4 p.m. at Buffalo High School Performing Arts Center in Buffalo, Minnesota. If you're listening to this before that date, it's a chance to go check it out in person because it's open to everybody, and it's only about an hour northwest of Minneapolis and between Minneapolis and St. Cloud, and we know a lot of you, our listeners, are within driving distance of that spot.
Yeah, and even if you aren't, perhaps there's time to make a weekend trip. It's a Sunday afternoon and head up to Buffalo, Minnesota and to the Performing Arts Center. There's a conversation that's taking place, more of a Q&A exchange with the composer, and with Sarah will be there too at 3, and then the symphony starts at 4 o'clock. So we've got some links along with the podcast episode, or find it on the website at paddleandportage.com, and there's some hyperlinks that'll take you right to where the tickets are and a little more specific information to this performance.
Just as important is this idea that we talk about a lot, which is hearing from our listeners, from our podcast subscribers, from the Paddle and Portage, some members. And it's one of those members, Hugh, that was the catalyst for the episode, as I said at the beginning.
That's right. I mean, Hugh reached out and just sent an email to me, Joe at paddleandportage.com, and said, there's this person, Sarah, she writes music, she's a music teacher, she's really into paddling, and she has a symphony about canoeing in the Boundary Waters. This whole story that we heard from Sarah, and all Hugh said was like, maybe you should check it out. Just putting this on your radar. Hugh also said, I'm proud to be a paying subscriber to Paddle and Portage, have an annual membership, and I really like the journalism on the website, and keep after it, y'all. It was just great to hear from Hugh, and that's what we're saying to you, the listener of the podcast, at the end of these episodes, when we're saying, like, send us your story ideas, send us some thoughts you have about the podcast. Like, that's how this all works. This story we heard today, Sarah's story about this symphony, is such a perfect example of that. And also, Hugh, thanks for the support, and thanks for this great story idea. Really, really appreciated hearing from you.
And to all of you who have shared your story ideas, thank you. To those of you who are still sitting on some weird, obscure thought, concept, idea, story that you've been too shy or embarrassed to send us, today's the day. Today is the day.
It's the day. Do it.
Make
it happen.
Just do it. Okay, we're getting all riled up, and I don't think that's appropriate because we're going to sort of wrap up today's episode with some nice orchestral music, similar to everything we've heard today, because Sarah's doing this with all sorts of music. It's not just the Paddler's Symphony. And all those originals, you'll have to come check out for yourself. We hope to see you there.